The restaurant hummed with the kind of controlled chaos that only a Friday night dinner rush could produce. Plates clattered in the kitchen, silverware clinked against porcelain, and the low murmur of conversation created a backdrop of white noise that Mia Torres had learned to navigate like a second language. She moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her worn black sneakers squeaking slightly against the polished floor, her apron pocket heavy with order pads, pens, and the weight of unpaid bills folded into tight squares. The Harborview wasn't fancy. Not by the standards of the wealthy clientele who sometimes wandered in from the marina, but it was respectable. White tablecloths, actual cloth napkins, a menu that changed seasonally. The kind of place where working-class families saved up to celebrate anniversaries, where business people held casual meetings over lunch, where the food was good enough to justify the prices, but not so expensive that Mia's tips ever broke 3 figures on even the best nights. She'd been working there for 3 years, ever since her mother died and left her with nothing but memories, a small apartment with rising rent, and a signature, her mother's signature that Mia had spent countless hours studying, tracing, trying to understand the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked 3 jobs, who'd never complained, even when the cancer was eating her from the inside out. Tonight felt different. Mia couldn't explain why, but there was an electricity in the air, a tension that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She'd learned to trust these instincts. Her mother had called it knowing weather, the ability to sense when a storm was coming long before the first clouds appeared. "Table 7 needs water," Carlos called from behind the bar, his accented English mixing with the clink of ice cubes. He was 50-something, with kind eyes and calloused hands, and he'd been working at the Harborview longer than anyone could remember. He'd given Mia extra shifts when her mother was in hospice, had slipped her food to take home, had never asked questions when she showed up with red-rimmed eyes. "On it," Mia called back, grabbing a pitcher from the service station. Table 7 was a party of 4, 2 couples in their 60s, dressed well but not ostentatiously, laughing over shared appetizers. Good tippers, probably. The kind who understood what it meant to work for a living. She refilled their glasses with a smile, answered questions about the special, pan-seared salmon with lemon butter sauce and roasted vegetables, and moved on to table 12, where a man sat alone, studying the menu with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for legal documents. He was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, with silver hair combed back from a high forehead and a suit that probably cost more than Mia's rent. Gold cufflinks caught the light, a Rolex glinted on his wrist. Mia had learned to spot the expensive watches, the designer handbags, the subtle markers of wealth that meant the difference between a 15% tip and 25%. "Good evening, sir," she said, pulling out her order pad. "Can I start you with something to drink?" He looked up, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or surprise. It was going so quickly, Mia thought she had imagined it. "Scotch," he said, his voice clipped, authoritative. "Macallan 18, neat, and bring the wine list." "Of course." Mia jotted down the order, noted the expectation in his tone, the way he didn't say please or thank you, the way his gaze had already returned to the menu as if she had ceased to exist the moment she'd served her purpose. She'd waited on hundreds of men like this. They tipped well if you were efficient and invisible. When she returned with his scotch in the leather-bound wine list, he was on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. "I told you to handle it discreetly. I don't care about the optics. I care about the bottom line. Make it happen." He ended the call without saying goodbye, took the scotch without acknowledging her presence, and waved the dismissive hand.
"Barely. Table 3 wants to speak to the manager about their steak. Again." Jenny rolled her eyes. "4th time they've sent it back. I think they're trying to get a free meal." "Want me to take it?" "Would you?" Relief flooded Jenny's face. "You're better at handling the difficult ones." Mia squeezed her shoulder. "I got you." She handled table 3 with patience, explained the manager's apology and offer of a complimentary dessert, soothed ruffled feathers with the kind of emotional labor that never appeared on her paycheck. By the time she returned to the man at table 12, 40 minutes had passed, and his scotch glass was empty. "Ready to order, sir?" He looked up, and this time his gaze lingered, studied her face, lingered on her name tag, Mia T., and then moved to her hands, her worn uniform, the small gold cross at her throat that had been her mother's. "The filet mignon," he said slowly. "Rare. Loaded baked potato. And another scotch." Mia wrote it down. "Excellent choice. I'll get that right in for you." "Wait." His voice stopped her mid-turn. "Have we met?" Something cold slithered down Mia's spine. She forced a polite smile. "I don't think so, sir. I'd remember." "What's your last name?" The question was too personal, too direct. But refusing to answer would seem rude, would risk her tip, would mark her as difficult. "Torres," she said carefully. His expression shifted, hardened, then smoothed into neutrality so quickly she almost missed it. "Torres," he repeated, as if testing the sound. "Common name." "Yes, sir." Mia waited, but he said nothing more, just nodded dismissal. She escaped to the kitchen, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't articulate. Carlos noticed immediately. "You okay, mija? You look pale." "I'm fine. Just table 12 is weird." "Weird how?" "I don't know. Just a feeling." She entered the order into the system, grabbed the scotch bottle from the bar, poured 2 fingers neat. Her hands were steady. They'd learned to be steady when her mother was dying, when creditors called, when the electricity got shut off for 3 days last winter. When she delivered the scotch, the man was writing in a leather portfolio, expensive pen moving across paper in bold, confident strokes. He didn't look up when she set the glass down, didn't acknowledge her existence. Mia told herself she was being paranoid, told herself it was just another customer, just another shift, just another night in a long string of nights that would eventually add up to something better. That's what her mother had always said. Keep moving forward, mija. Every step counts. The restaurant began to empty as the night wore on. The couples at 7 left a generous tip and warm smiles. Table 14 needed their check split 4 ways, which took an extra 10 minutes she didn't have. Jenny handled the table 3 situation with the manager, who comped their meal and shot Mia a grateful look. He knew she'd smoothed things over earlier. At 11, the man at table 12 was one of only 3 occupied tables. His meal had been delivered an hour ago, eaten methodically, plate cleared. But he was still there, nursing a 3rd scotch, his portfolio closed, his attention fixed on his phone. Mia approached cautiously. "Can I get you anything else, sir? Coffee? Dessert?" He looked up, and this time his gaze was calculating. "Just the check." She printed it, $127.43, and placed it in the leather folder, setting it discreetly to his right. "Whenever you're ready, no rush."
5 minutes later, she was wiping down the bar when Carlos nudged her. "Your guy's ready." Mia walked over, lifted the folder. Inside was a black American Express card and 3 crisp $100 bills. Her heartbeat quickened. That was almost $170 over the check. Easily a $50 tip, maybe more if he told her to keep the change. But when she picked up the check, she saw something else. Clipped to it was a business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. Richard Ashford, President and CEO, Ashford Industries. And beneath it, in red ink, he'd written, "We need to talk. My office, Monday, 9 a.m. Mia's blood turned to ice. She looked up, but Richard Ashford was already standing, sliding his phone into his inner jacket pocket, buttoning his suit with practiced ease. "Sir, I don't understand." "Monday," he repeated, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. 9 a.m. "The address is on the card. Don't be late." He started to walk away, then paused, turning back. His eyes, pale blue, cold as winter sky, fixed on her face. "And bring any documentation your mother might have left. Letters, photographs. Anything with my signature on it. Then he was gone, striding through the restaurant with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his right to command, to demand, to take up space. The door chimed as he left, and Mia stood frozen, the business card burning in her hand like a live coal. Carlos appeared at her elbow. "Mia, what's wrong?" She couldn't speak, couldn't process. Her mother had never mentioned anyone named Richard Ashford, had never talked about her past beyond vague references to better times and mistakes we all make young. Mia had always assumed her father was a nobody, a one-night stand, a man who'd never known she existed. But that signature comment, anything with my signature on it. Mia's apartment was small, cluttered with the accumulated weight of 2 lives compressed into 600 square feet. Rosa's things still occupied half the space, boxes Mia hadn't had the heart to sort through, clothes still hanging in the closet, books stacked on every available surface. Rosa Torres had loved books, had checked them out from the library by the dozen, and read to Mia every night until she was too weak to hold the pages. Among those boxes was a small fireproof safe. Mia had found it after the funeral, tucked in the back of her mother's closet behind winter coats and old shoes. It had taken her 3 weeks to work up the courage to open it. Inside was Rosa's birth certificate, social security card, a few pieces of costume jewelry, and a manila envelope sealed with tape yellowed by age. Mia had opened it once. Inside were photographs. Her mother, young and beautiful, maybe 20 years old, standing outside a building Mia didn't recognize. Rosa was wearing a sundress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her smile radiant in a way Mia had never seen in life. There were other photos, too. Rosa at what looked like a company picnic. Rosa in an office, sitting at a desk, professional and poised. And one photo that Mia had stared at for a long time. Rosa standing next to a man in a suit, his arm around his waist, both of them laughing at something off camera. The man's face had been carefully cut out of the photograph, scissored away with surgical precision, leaving a ghostly absence where features should have been. Beneath the photos was a letter, 2 pages, handwritten on company letterhead. The signature at the bottom was bold and confident. Richard Ashford. Mia hadn't read the letter. Couldn't. The first line had been enough. "Rosa, what happened between us can never be acknowledged publicly." She'd sealed it all back up, shoved the envelope deep in the safe, and tried to forget. But she'd kept it. Some instinct had told her it might matter someday. Now, at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, Mia sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor with the safe open in front of her and the manila envelope in her trembling hands. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street below. Streetlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. She opened the envelope, pulled out the photographs, studied them with adult eyes in new context. Her mother couldn't have been more than 22 in these pictures. So young, so full of life. What happened? Who was Richard Ashford to her? Mia unfolded the letter, smoothed it against her thigh, and began to read. "Rosa, what happened between us can never be acknowledged publicly. You understand the position this puts me in, my career, my family, my reputation. I've arranged for a settlement that should more than adequately compensate you for your discretion. The amount we discussed will be deposited in the account you specified. And in return, you will sign the attached non-disclosure agreement and cease all contact with me, my family, and Ashford Industries. I want to be clear. Any attempt to claim paternity or seek further financial support will be met with the full force of my legal team. You signed an employment contract that included specific clauses about personal conduct and conflicts of interest. Pursuing this matter would violate those terms and constitute grounds for legal action that would be both costly and damaging to your future prospects. I don't say this to be cruel, Rosa. You're a smart girl with potential. Use the money to build a better life for yourself. Finish your degree. Start over somewhere else. Make something of yourself. But do it away from here, away from me, and never contact me again. The decision you make now will determine the course of your entire future. Choose wisely. Sincerely, Richard Ashford." Mia read the letter 3 times, each word sinking deeper like stones dropped in dark water. The cold, transactional tone, the veiled threats, the casual dismissal of her mother's worth, her dignity,
her very existence. And the date at the top, June 15th, 1999, 25 years ago, 6 months before Mia was born. She set the letter down with shaking hands and reached for the last item in the envelope, a folded document, official and dense with legal language, a non-disclosure agreement. Every page initialed in her mother's careful handwriting, and at the bottom, 2 signatures, Rosa Torres and Richard Ashford. But there was something else. Clipped to the NDA was a bank deposit slip, $50,000 deposited to a checking account in Rosa's name, and a handwritten note on a torn piece of paper, the edges ragged, the ink faded but still legible. This is blood money, but it will feed my baby. God forgive me. Mia's mother had taken the money, had signed the NDA, and disappeared from Richard Ashford's life and built a new one in this small coastal town 300 miles from wherever she'd come from. She'd raised Mia alone, never once mentioning the money, the settlement, the man who'd paid her to vanish. And now that man had walked into her restaurant, had recognized her somehow, and was summoning her to his office like she was a problem to be managed. Mia didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, not as she'd been in those final months, gaunt and gray, but as she appeared in the photographs, young, hopeful. In love, maybe? Had Rosa loved Richard Ashford? Or had it been something else? Ambition, naivete, the intoxicating proximity to power and money. She thought about all the times her mother had worked double shifts at the diner, the nursing home, the grocery store where she stocked shelves from midnight to 6 a.m. The times they'd eaten rice and beans for a week straight because that's all they could afford. The times Rosa had patched Mia's school clothes, cut her hair in the kitchen, and made birthday cakes from box mix and decorated them with dollar store candles. If Rosa had $50,000, where had it gone? Mia knew the answer. Medical bills. Rosa had been diagnosed with breast cancer when Mia was 15. No insurance. Working 3 part-time jobs meant none of them offered benefits. The bills piled up faster than snow in the blizzard. Surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, medications that cost hundreds of dollars for a month's supply. The cancer had gone into remission for 2 years, long enough to give them hope, and then it had roared back, metastasized to her bones, her liver, her lungs. She fought until there was nothing left to fight with. And she died with $47,000 in medical debt that Mia was still paying off, $25 at a time when she could spare it.
The $50,000, the blood money, as her mother had called it, had bought them time, a few more years together. A chance for Mia to finish high school, to graduate, to become something more than a teenage girl orphaned by poverty and disease. At 6 a.m., Mia gave up on sleep. She made coffee in the ancient percolator her mother had found at a thrift store, stood by the window watching the sun rise over the harbor, and tried to decide what to do. She could ignore Richard Ashford's summons, pretend it had never happened, go to work tonight, Sunday brunch tomorrow, continue the steady rhythm of her life. But she knew men like him. They didn't make requests, they issued commands. If she didn't show up Monday morning, he'd find another way to reach her. And she had questions that had lived dormant inside her for 25 years, suddenly roaring to life. Who was Richard Ashford? Was he her father? Did he have other children? Did they know about her? Or was she a secret carefully buried, a mistake he'd paid to erase? And what did he want from her now? Mia showered, dressed in her most professional clothes, black slacks from Target, a white blouse she'd bought for her mother's funeral, flats that were comfortable but presentable. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw her mother's face staring back. The same dark eyes, high cheekbones, olive skin that tanned easily. But there was something else too, something in the shape of her jaw, the line of her nose, features she'd never been able to trace to her mother. She'd always assumed she looked like her father. Now she might finally know. The day passed in a strange fugue state. Mia went through the motions, cleaned the apartment, did laundry, responded to texts from Jenny about schedule changes, but her mind was elsewhere.
running through scenarios, rehearsing conversations, imagining confrontations that ranged from tearful reunion to cold rejection. By Sunday, she'd made a decision. She would go to the meeting, she would listen to what Richard Ashford had to say, and she would decide, based on what she learned, whether to pursue this connection or walk away and never look back. But first, she needed to understand who she was dealing with. The library opened at noon on Sundays. Mia was waiting at the doors when the elderly librarian, Mrs. Chin, unlocked them with a smile. "Early bird today, Mia?" "Research project," which wasn't entirely a lie. The computers were old but functional. Mia settled into a corner desk, pulled up Google, and typed Richard Ashford. The results were overwhelming. Hundreds of articles, news stories, press releases. Richard Ashford was everywhere. Ashford Industries was a manufacturing conglomerate worth an estimated $800 million, with facilities across the country producing everything from automotive parts to medical devices. Richard had inherited the company from his father in the early 1990s when it was struggling, and had transformed it into an empire through aggressive expansion, strategic acquisitions, and a reputation for ruthless efficiency. He was married to Catherine Ashford, née Vanderburg, daughter of a Dutch shipping magnate. They had 3 children: Daniel, 32, who worked as an executive VP at Ashford Industries; Victoria, 28, a lawyer in New York; and Christopher, 26, who'd made headlines 2 years ago for a DUI that Richard's lawyers had somehow reduced to reckless driving. There were photos of the family at charity galas, yacht clubs, political fundraisers. Catherine was elegant and cold, her blonde hair always perfect, her smile measured. The children had inherited their parents' good looks and sense of entitlement. You could see it in the way they stood, the way they looked at the camera as if they owned not just the moment, but the entire world. Mia studied their faces, searching for any resemblance, any hint that she might share blood with these people. Daniel had Richard's jaw, Victoria had his eyes, Christopher had his mother's coloring but his father's bearing.
And Mia? She looked nothing like any of them. But she looked exactly like the young woman in those photographs, the one Richard Ashford had paid to disappear. Mia dug deeper. She found articles about Ashford Industries' labor practices, a lawsuit in 2015 from workers claiming wage theft settled out of court, environmental violations in 2018 resulting in a fine that was pocket change to a company worth hundreds of millions, and a pattern of aggressive litigation against anyone who challenged the company's interests. Former employees, journalists, competitors. Richard Ashford didn't just win, he crushed. By 3 p.m., Mia's eyes ached from staring at the screen, and her coffee had gone cold. But she had a clearer picture now. Richard Ashford was powerful, wealthy, and dangerous. He was a man who'd built an empire by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than everyone else. He was a man who'd paid her mother $50,000 to vanish, and who threatened legal action if she ever came back. And he was, almost certainly, Mia's father. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like wet sand. She'd spent her whole life not knowing, not caring, telling herself it didn't matter. She'd had her mother, and that had been enough. But Rosa was gone now, and the absence of answers had become its own presence, a ghost haunting every corner of Mia's life. She wanted to know. She needed to know, not because it would change who she was, but because the truth was hers to claim, and Richard Ashford had no right to keep it from her. Monday morning arrived cold and clear, one of those October days where autumn finally felt real, where the air smelled like dead leaves and coming winter. Mia dressed carefully in her funeral clothes, pinned her mother's cross at her throat, and tucked the manila envelope into a canvas tote bag that had seen better days. Ashford Industries was headquartered in a gleaming glass tower downtown, the kind of building that spoke of serious money and serious power. Mia had passed it 100 times on the bus and never imagined she'd have reason to go inside. The lobby was all marble and chrome,
with a security desk staffed by two men in crisp uniforms and a visitor's sign-in system that looked more complex than airport security. Mia approached the desk, her heart beat loud in her ears, her palms sweating despite the air conditioning. "I have an appointment with Mr. Ashford," she said, proud that her voice came out steady. "9 a.m., Mia Torres." The guard, older, with salt and pepper hair and a name tag that read Martinez, checked his computer, then his clipboard, frowning. "I don't see you on the schedule. He told me Friday night to be here at 9. Mia pulled out Richard's business card, the one with the handwritten note. "He gave me this." Martinez studied the card, then looked at her with new assessment, something like sympathy flickering in his eyes. He picked up the phone, spoke quietly, listened, hung up. "16th floor, executive reception. They're expecting you." The elevator ride felt like ascending into another world. Each floor marked rising levels of power and privilege, legal on 7, accounting on 9, operations on 12. 16 was the top floor, reserved for the C-suite executives who made the decisions that trickled down through the entire company like rain through leaves. The doors opened into a reception area that could have graced a luxury hotel. Soft lighting, comfortable leather chairs, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than Mia's yearly income. A receptionist with perfect makeup and a designer suit looked up from her computer with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mia Torres?" "Yes. Mr. Ashford is running a few minutes behind. Please have a seat." 15 minutes passed, then 20. Mia watched employees come and go, men and women in expensive suits, carrying leather portfolios, moving with the confidence of people who belonged in spaces like this. None of them looked at her. She was invisible here, just another person waiting in reception, probably a vendor or a job applicant or someone else of no consequence. At 9:35, the receptionist's phone buzzed. "You can go in now. Last door on the left."
The hallway was lined with photographs, historical images of the original Ashford factory, black and white shots from the 1950s, color photos documenting the company's growth. And at the end, behind double doors made of dark wood that gleamed like water, was Richard Ashford's office. Mia knocked. "Come in." The office was enormous, taking up the entire corner of the building, with windows on two sides, offering panoramic views of the harbor and the city beyond. The furniture was leather and wood, the carpet thick enough to muffle footsteps, the artwork original and expensive. Behind an aircraft carrier-sized desk sat Richard Ashford, looking every inch the emperor of his domain. He stood as she entered, a courtesy that felt more like power play than politeness. "Miss Torres, thank you for coming. Please sit." Mia crossed the room, her footsteps silent, and sat in one of the chairs facing his desk. She kept her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, her face neutral. She'd learned composure from her mother, who'd maintained her dignity even when creditors called, even when the electricity was shut off, even when the cancer was winning. Richard settled back into his chair, steepled his fingers, and studied her with those cold blue eyes. "I'm going to be direct," he said, "because I think you deserve that much and because time is valuable. 25 years ago, I had a brief relationship with your mother. It ended poorly. I paid her a settlement to ensure discretion. She signed a non-disclosure agreement. Based on your age and appearance, I believe I'm your biological father." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mia had expected them, but hearing them spoken aloud still felt like being punched in the chest. She said nothing, waiting. Richard leaned forward slightly. "I want to be clear about something. My life is complicated. My family doesn't know about you. My children don't know about you, and it needs to stay that way.
Your mother understood this. The NDA she signed covered not just her, but any offspring. You're bound by its terms. I never signed anything, Mia said quietly. It doesn't matter. The agreement stipulates that the terms extend to descendants. My lawyers have reviewed the language extensively. If you attempt to make our relationship public, if you contact my family, if you speak to the press, you will be in breach of contract. And the penalties for breach are severe. Financial damages in the millions, legal fees that would bankrupt you, criminal charges for fraud if you try to claim inheritance rights. Mia's hands tightened in her lap. Is that why you called me here? To threaten me? I called you here, Richard said, his voice softening slightly, because I saw you Friday night and recognized your mother in your face. Because I've spent 25 years wondering what happened to the child Rosa was carrying when she left, and because I wanted to see for myself what kind of person you'd become. He paused, his expression unreadable. Your mother was special, Mia. Brilliant, actually. She worked as my assistant for 2 years. She was the best I'd ever had. Organized, intuitive, 3 steps ahead of everyone else. If she'd been born 20 years later into a different family, she could have been running her own company. But she was young, and I was married. It was a mistake, one I've regretted in my own way. You paid her to disappear, Mia said, and she couldn't keep the edge out of her voice. You threatened her with legal action. You erased her from your life like she was nothing. I protected my family, Richard corrected. My marriage, my children's future, my company's reputation. That's what leaders do, Mia. They make hard choices. They prioritize the greater good over individual desires. The greater good, Mia laughed, a bitter sound. You mean your good, your comfort, your wealth. My family's security, Richard snapped, and for the first time emotion cracked through his controlled exterior. Do you have any idea what it's like to build something from near bankruptcy, to carry the weight of hundreds of employees who depend on you for their livelihoods? To know that one scandal, one misstep could bring it all crashing down?
Do you have any idea what it's like, Mia shot back, to watch your mother work herself to death because $50,000 wasn't enough to cover the medical bills for the cancer that killed her? To grow up poor, to go without, to never know where you came from or why your father didn't want you? Silence fell between them, heavy and charged. Outside the windows, the city carried on, boats crossing the harbor, cars moving through streets, people living their lives unaware that in this office, 2 people were negotiating the terms of a relationship that should have been built on love, but was instead constructed from contracts and threats. Richard was the first to look away. Your mother's death, I didn't know. I'm sorry. Are you? Mia asked. Or are you just sorry it's inconvenient? He stood, walked to the windows, stared out at the view he'd earned or inherited or stolen, depending on who told the story. What do you want, Mia? Money? I can arrange a trust fund, something substantial, on the condition that you maintain the NDA's terms. Education? I can pay for college, graduate school, whatever you want to pursue. A job? I can make a call, get you placed somewhere with real opportunities. I want, Mia said, standing as well, to know if you ever loved her, if you ever cared about what happened to her, what happened to me, if we were ever anything more than a problem you solved with money and contracts. Richard turned to face her, and for a moment she saw something in his expression. Regret, maybe? Or grief? Or just the weariness of carrying secrets for 25 years. I cared, he said quietly. I cared very much. Rosa was extraordinary. And if circumstances had been different, if I'd been different, maybe things would have turned out another way. But I chose my family. I chose the life I'd built. And I can't undo that choice now, Mia. I can only try to make things right going forward. By keeping me a secret. By protecting both of us from a scandal that would hurt everyone involved. My children don't deserve to have their lives upended by this.
My wife doesn't deserve public humiliation. And you don't deserve to be torn apart by the media, to have your life dissected, to become a tabloid story. Trust me, Mia, I'm trying to help you." Mia looked at him. This man who was her father but would never claim her, who offered money but not love, who saw her as a liability to be managed rather than a daughter to be cherished. And she understood, with sudden clarity, that her mother had made the right choice all those years ago. Rosa had taken the money and run because she'd known Richard Ashford would never choose her over his empire. And she'd raised Mia alone because being raised by one parent who loved you was better than being raised by two who saw you as an obligation. "I don't want your money. I don't want a job or a trust fund or any of it. I just wanted to know the truth, and now I do." She turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped her. "Mia, wait. The NDA. I'm not going to violate your precious NDA. Not because I'm afraid of your lawyers, but because my mother kept her secret for 25 years, and I'll honor her choice. But don't contact me again. Don't come to my restaurant. Don't pretend you care. Just stay in your tower with your perfect family and your millions of dollars, and let me live my life." She walked out before he could respond, down the hallway, into the elevator, through the lobby where Martinez, the guard, nodded sympathetically. She made it to the street before the tears came, standing on the corner outside Ashford Industries, with the manila envelope still clutched in her canvas bag, crying for her mother, for herself, for the relationship that would never exist. A hand touched her shoulder. Mia spun, heart hammering, expecting security, or lawyers, or Richard himself. Instead, she found a woman in her 30s, professional but approachable, with kind eyes and an uncertain smile. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to startle you. Are you Mia Torres?" Mia wiped her eyes. "Who's asking?" "My name is Sarah Chen. I am an investigative journalist. I've been researching Ashford Industries for a story about corporate accountability, and I think you might have information that could help." Mia stared at the business card, her mind racing. Sarah Chen, investigative journalist, Harbor City Tribune. A phone number, an email address, and a simple question that contained multitudes of danger. "How did you know who I am?" Mia asked carefully. Sarah glanced around, noting the security cameras, the foot traffic, the proximity to Ashford Industries. "Is there somewhere we could talk? Somewhere more private?" Mia's instincts screamed caution. She'd just been threatened with lawsuits and criminal charges if she violated an NDA she'd never signed. The last thing she needed was to be caught talking to a journalist investigating the man who'd paid her mother to disappear. But something in Sarah's expression, earnest, determined, tired in the way of people who'd been chasing truth for too long, made her hesitate. "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks north. The Morning Grind. Meet me there in 10 minutes. She walked away before Sarah could respond, taking a circuitous route that let her think, breathe, compose herself. The tears had stopped, leaving her face tight and her eyes gritty. She ducked into a CVS, bought a bottle of water and some tissue, cleaned herself up in the tiny bathroom. The woman in the mirror looked haunted, hollow-eyed, like someone who'd just discovered that the foundation of their life was built on lies and legal contracts. The Morning Grind was a local place, not a chain, with mismatched furniture and coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of burned water. Mia ordered a black coffee, no money for fancy lattes, and claimed a corner table away from the windows. Sarah arrived exactly 10 minutes later, ordered tea, and sat down across from Mia with the careful movements of someone approaching a wounded animal. "Thank you for talking to me. I know this must be overwhelming." "You didn't answer my question. How did you know who I am?" Sarah pulled out a tablet, turned it awake, and turned it to face Mia. On the screen was a photograph, grainy, clearly taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It showed Mia walking into Ashford Industries this morning, and beside it, a photo of Rosa Torres from 25 years ago, standing outside what looked like the same building. "I've been investigating Richard Ashford for 6 months. He's very good at hiding his mistakes, but everyone leaves a trail. I found records of a settlement paid to a Rosa Torres in 1999, buried in old company financial documents, listed as consulting services. $50,000, which is way too much for actual consulting, and exactly the right amount for making a problem disappear. Mia's coffee had gone cold in her hands. How did you get those records? Ashford Industries went through a hostile takeover attempt in 2003. During the due diligence process, thousands of pages of internal documents got copied and stored by the competing firm. When that firm went bankrupt in 2015, their archives got liquidated. I've been digging through them for months. Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping. Rosa Torres disappeared from all public records after 1999. No credit cards, no bank accounts in her name, nothing. Like she vanished. But I found her obituary from 3 years ago, and I found your name listed as her surviving daughter. That doesn't explain how you knew I'd be at Ashford's office this morning. Sarah had the grace to look uncomfortable. I've been watching Richard Ashford, following his movements, documenting his meetings, building a timeline. Last Friday, my source inside the building told me he canceled his evening plans suddenly and went to a restaurant instead, the Harborview. I called the restaurant, asked who'd served him. They told me a waitress named Mia T worked that night. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. Torres, Mia, right age, right location. Mia should have been angry at the invasion of privacy, the calculated manipulation, the way she'd become a chess piece in someone else's game. But mostly, she felt exhausted. What do you want from me?
The truth, Sarah said simply. Richard Ashford has spent decades building a reputation as a captain of industry, a philanthropist, a family man. But I've found evidence of labor violations, environmental crimes, intimidation tactics against whistleblowers. He's not who he pretends to be. And I think your mother's story, your story, is part of a larger pattern of powerful men using money and legal pressure to silence people who could damage their image. I signed an NDA, Mia lied, testing. Did you? Or did your mother sign one that Richard's lawyers are claiming extends to you? Sarah's eyes were sharp. Because I've had 3 lawyers review the language of standard NDAs from that era, and they all say the same thing. You can't bind someone to a contract they never agreed to. The enforceability is questionable at best. Mia thought about Richard's threats, the millions in damages, the criminal fraud charges. His lawyers seemed pretty confident. Lawyers always seem confident. It's part of their job description. But Mia, think about it. If Richard really had an airtight legal case against you, why did he bring you to his office to threaten you privately instead of just sending you a cease and desist letter? Why take the risk of meeting with you at all? It was a good question, one Mia didn't have an answer for. Sarah pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. I'm not asking you to violate any agreement or put yourself at legal risk. I'm just asking you to look at this. These are stories from other people who've been hurt by Ashford Industries, workers who got injured on the job and then got fired when they tried to file for workers' comp, communities that had their water poisoned by chemical runoff, families of employees who died in preventable accidents. And in every case, Richard Ashford's lawyers made the problem go away with settlements and NDAs. Mia opened the folder. Inside were printed articles, legal documents, photographs of people, real people, with names and faces and stories. A man named Marcus Williams, who'd lost 3 fingers in a machine that should have had safety guards. A woman named Elena Rodriguez, whose son developed leukemia after growing up near an Ashford Industries factory that had been illegally dumping carcinogens. A whistleblower named David Park, who'd tried to report accounting fraud and ended up blacklisted from the industry. Each story followed the same pattern: injury or injustice, initial outcry, then sudden silence. Settlements, NDAs, threats of legal action.
And Richard Ashford, always in the background, protected by layers of lawyers and corporate structure, never directly accountable. These people, Sarah said quietly, they trusted the system. They thought if they worked hard and played by the rules, they'd be protected. But the system protects people like Richard Ashford, not people like them, not people like your mother. Mia closed the folder, pushed it back across the table. I can't help you. Can't or won't? Does it matter? Mia stood, grabbing her bag. I have a life, a job I need to keep, rent I need to pay, bills that don't care about truth or justice. I can't afford to go to war with a billionaire. My mother couldn't afford it either, and that's why she took his money and disappeared. Not because she was weak or a coward, but because she was practical, because she knew she couldn't win. What if you didn't have to fight alone? Sarah stood too, urgent now. What if there were others willing to stand with you? What if nothing? You're looking for a hero, someone brave enough to stand up to power. I'm just a waitress trying to survive. Find someone else for your story. She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Sarah Chen and her folder of broken dreams behind. But as she rode the bus back to her apartment, Mia couldn't stop thinking about those faces in the photographs. Marcus Williams with his bandaged hand, Elena Rodriguez with her dying son, David Park, whose career had been destroyed for telling the truth. They'd all been silenced, all paid off or threatened into submission, all sacrificed so that Richard Ashford could maintain his empire and his reputation. Just like her mother. She cleaned, scrubbed the kitchen until it gleamed, organized the closet, folded laundry with hospital corners her mother had taught her. But no amount of physical activity could quiet the questions echoing in her skull. What would Rosa want her to do? Her mother had chosen silence, had taken the settlement, had built a life around protecting Mia from the truth. But Rosa had also kept every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence. She'd locked it in a fireproof safe and left it for Mia to find. Why? As insurance? As confession? As permission? At 4 p.m., Mia's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Torres? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. This is Jennifer Martinez from Whitfield & Associates. We're legal counsel for Mr. Richard Ashford. I'm calling to follow up on this morning's meeting and to clarify the terms of the non-disclosure agreement that governs your relationship with our client. Mia's stomach dropped. I told Mr. Ashford I wouldn't violate the NDA. We appreciate that. However, we've been made aware that you were seen this morning in conversation with Sarah Chen, a journalist known for publishing defamatory content about our client. We want to remind you that any discussion of Mr. Ashford's private affairs, past or present, constitutes a breach of the NDA's terms. This includes conversations with members of the press. I didn't tell her anything. Nevertheless, the appearance of impropriety is concerning. Mr. Ashford is prepared to be generous, Miss Torres. He's authorized me to offer you a settlement, $150,000, placed in a trust fund accessible only to you, with the stipulation that you sign an updated NDA with expanded language covering digital media and social platforms. This is a one-time offer, good for 72 hours. After that, our position becomes less flexible. $150,000. Mia's rent was $1,200 a month. That money would buy her more than 10 years of security. She could quit the Harborview, go back to school, build the kind of life her mother had dreamed of for her. All she had to do was promise to stay silent about a man who'd never wanted her anyway. I need to think about it, Mia heard herself say. Of course, I'll email you the contract details. Please review carefully. And Miss Torres, we're monitoring the situation. Any further contact with Miss Chen or any other journalists will be considered hostile action. I trust you understand the implications. The line went dead. Mia stood in her tiny kitchen, phone still pressed to her ear, and wondered when her life had become a legal thriller instead of a quiet tragedy. The Harborview was busy that night. Monday being unexpectedly popular, some local company was having a celebration dinner, taking up half the dining room. Mia moved through her shift on autopilot, taking orders, delivering food, smiling at customers who didn't see her as a person, just as the mechanism by which their needs got met. Ginny noticed. "You okay? You seem distracted." "Just tired," Mia lied. "Well, wake up. Table 6 is getting impatient, and Carlos says his cousin's band is playing at the Anchor tonight if you want to come after close. Could be fun." "Maybe. We'll see how I feel." At 9 p.m., during a brief lull, Carlos pulled her aside near the bar. "Mija, there was a man here earlier asking about you. Tall guy, expensive suit, said he was a lawyer. I told him you weren't working today, but he left his card." He handed it over, concern etched in his weathered face. "You in some kind of trouble?" Mia looked at the card. Whitfield and Associates. Not Jennifer Martinez, but another name. Thomas Whitfield, senior partner. "It's complicated. Family stuff." "Family stuff that needs lawyers?" Carlos's frown deepened. "Mia, if you need help—" "I know. Thank you." She squeezed his arm, tucked the card in her apron pocket. "I can handle it."
But could she? That was the question that plagued her through the rest of her shift, through last call and cleanup, through the walk home under streetlights that seemed dimmer than usual. The city felt different now, like she was seeing it through new eyes, the way power moved through it like an invisible current, the way money bought silence, the way people like Richard Ashford shaped reality to their preferences while people like her mother simply disappeared. When she got home at midnight, there was an envelope taped to her apartment door. No postage, no return address, just her name written in neat block letters. Mia took it inside, locked the door, turned on all the lights before opening it. Inside were more photographs. Recent ones, taken with a telephoto lens. Mia walking into Ashford Industries. Mia talking to Sarah Chen at the coffee shop. Mia at the bus stop, at the grocery store, at the Harborview. A week's worth of surveillance, cataloged and documented. And a note, typed on plain paper. "We're watching. Make the right choice." Mia's hand shook as she spread the photographs across her kitchen table. This was intimidation, pure and simple. A message that she had no privacy, no safety, no escape. Richard Ashford's money could reach anywhere, see anything, control everything. Her mother had lived with this weight for 25 years, had looked over her shoulder every day, wondering if today was the day Richard changed his mind about their arrangement, had died never feeling truly free. And now, that burden had passed to Mia. She thought about the settlement offer. $150,000. Financial security. A chance to escape the endless grind of low-wage work. All she had to do was sign a contract promising to remain silent about truths that no one wanted to hear anyway. Or she could call Sarah Chen. Could add her voice to the chorus of people Richard Ashford had silenced. Could honor her mother's memory not by protecting Richard's secrets, but by exposing them. Either choice came with costs she wasn't sure she could afford. Mia didn't sleep that night. At 3 a.m., she sat at her kitchen table with her mother's documents spread before her, reading and rereading the letter Richard had written to Rosa. "The decision you make now will determine the course of your entire future. Choose wisely." He'd written those words to her mother. Now they echoed across 25 years, landing on Mia's shoulders with the weight of inherited trauma. At 6 a.m., she made a decision. She called Sarah Chen. "Hello?" Sarah's voice was groggy, confused. Mia had woken her up. "It's Mia Torres. I'm sorry to call so early, but—" She paused, gathered her courage. "I want to tell you my story, all of it, but I need to do it right. I need protection, legal advice, someone who can help me understand what I'm risking."
Silence on the other end of the line, then rustling as Sarah apparently sat up. "I can connect you with lawyers who specialize in whistleblower protection, pro bono if money's an issue. And I have contacts at other publications. If Ashford tries to silence the Tribune, we can make sure the story gets out through other channels." "He's been following me," Mia said quietly. "Someone left surveillance photos on my door last night. He's trying to scare me into taking his settlement." "That's intimidation. Potentially illegal. Definitely unethical." Sarah's voice hardened with anger. "Mia, this is exactly the kind of behavior that needs to be documented and exposed. Men like Richard Ashford think they can do whatever they want because no one will hold them accountable. But you can change that." "I'm scared," Mia admitted. "My mother was scared too, and she chose silence. Maybe she was right." "Or maybe," Sarah said gently, "she chose silence because she had to, because she was alone and pregnant and 22 years old with no resources and no support. But you're not alone, Mia. I'm here, and there are others who will stand with you. All the people he's hurt over the years, all the people who've been waiting for someone brave enough to speak first." Mia thought about Marcus Williams and Elena Rodriguez and David Park, thought about her mother, dying with $50,000 in medical debt and a secret she'd carried for 25 years. Thought about Richard Ashford in his tower, surrounded by his perfect family and his millions of dollars, never held accountable for the casualties his ambition had created. "Okay," she said, "tell me what I need to do." The first step was documentation. Sarah connected Mia with a lawyer named Patricia Okafor, a woman in her 50s who specialized in employment law and whistleblower cases. They met at Patricia's office, a modest space in a renovated warehouse, nothing like the gleaming tower where Richard Ashford held court. Patricia was direct, no nonsense, and brutally honest about the risks. "The NDA your mother signed is problematic, but not insurmountable. You never signed it, which means they'd have to prove you're bound by its terms through inheritance or agency law. That's a high bar. But Richard Ashford has very good lawyers, and they'll make your life hell even if their case is weak. What's the worst that could happen?" Mia asked. "Financially? They could sue you for breach of contract, seeking damages equal to the settlement amount plus legal fees. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. They could also pursue defamation claims if anything you say is proven false, though truth is an absolute defense. And they'll try to destroy your credibility, dig into your background, your finances, your personal life. They'll paint you as a gold digger, an opportunist, someone trying to extort money from a wealthy family." Mia's stomach churned. And what's the best that could happen? Patricia smiled, and it was fierce. "We win. The story gets published, Richard Ashford faces consequences, and other people he silenced find the courage to come forward. The best outcome isn't just about you, Mia. It's about changing a system that lets men like him operate with impunity." Over the next 2 days, Mia told his story again and again. To Patricia, to Sarah's editor at the Tribune, a gray-haired woman named Margaret, who asked tough questions and took copious notes. They recorded everything, photographed all the documents, built a timeline that stretched from 1999 to the present. And they reached out to others. Marcus Williams agreed to be interviewed, his voice shaking as he described the accident that cost him his fingers and the way Ashford Industries lawyers had blamed him for violating safety protocols that didn't exist. Elena Rodriguez brought medical records showing her son's leukemia diagnosis and EPA documents that proved Ashford Industries had been dumping chemicals illegally for years. David Park shared emails that documented the accounting fraud he'd discovered and the threats he'd received when he tried to report it. Each story added weight to the narrative. Each voice made it harder for Richard Ashford to dismiss the accusations as the complaints of a disgruntled, illegitimate daughter. On Wednesday afternoon, 48 hours after Mia's early morning call to Sarah, the Tribune's legal team finished their review. The story was solid, defensible, and ready to publish. They planned to run it Sunday, giving them time for final fact-checking and giving Mia time to prepare for the inevitable backlash. But Richard Ashford had other plans. Thursday morning, Mia woke to her phone ringing incessantly. Carlos, Jenny, her landlord, the manager of the Harborview, all of them with variations of the same message. Lawyers representing Richard Ashford had contacted them, asking questions about Mia's character, her work performance, her financial situation, her relationships. "They're doing opposition research," Patricia explained when Mia called her in a panic, "looking for anything they can use to discredit you before the story drops. It's standard intimidation tactics. Don't engage with anyone asking questions. Refer them to me." At noon, a courier delivered a thick envelope to Mia's apartment. Inside was a lawsuit, Richard Ashford versus Mia Torres, claiming breach of contract, tortious interference, and defamation. They were suing her for $2 million. Mia sat on her apartment floor surrounded by legal documents she barely understood and tried not to hyperventilate. $2 million. She didn't have $2,000. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was warfare.
Patricia arrived within an hour, reviewed the documents, and made a sound of disgust. This is a SLAPP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's designed to silence you through the cost of legal defense, not because they think they'll win. They're hoping you'll drop out of Sarah's article to make the lawsuit go away. Will that work? Mia asked. If I withdraw, will they drop it? Probably. But Mia, if you withdraw now, Richard wins. He gets to keep silencing people with money and fear. And the next person who tries to speak up will face the same threats. "I can't afford this," Mia said, and her voice cracked. "I can't afford a lawyer. I can't afford to lose my job. I can't—" "You're not alone," Patricia interrupted firmly. "I'm taking your case pro bono, and I've already reached out to the ACLU and the National Whistleblower Center. They're interested in your case because it represents a larger pattern of corporate abuse. We can fight this, Mia, but I need to know you're committed, because once we engage, there's no backing down without serious consequences." Mia thought about her mother, about Rosa Torres, who'd been 22 and pregnant and alone when Richard Ashford made his offer, who'd chosen silence not because she was weak, but because she was practical, because she'd understood that fighting was a luxury she couldn't afford. But Mia wasn't alone. She had Patricia and Sarah and Margaret. She had Marcus and Elena and David, all willing to add their voices to hers. She had her mother's documents, carefully preserved, as if Rosa had always known that someday someone would need them. "I'm committed," Mia said. "Let's fight." Friday brought another escalation. The Harborview's owner called Mia into his office, a cramped space that smelled of old coffee and stress. Dan Cooper was in his 60s, had owned the restaurant for 30 years, and had always treated his staff fairly. But he looked uncomfortable now. Wouldn't quite meet Mia's eyes. "I got a call from Richard Ashford's lawyers," he said without preamble. "They informed me that you're involved in some kind of legal dispute with their client. They suggested it would be in the restaurant's best interest to distance ourselves from any potential controversy." Mia's chest tightened. "Are you firing me?" "I don't want to," Dan said, and he sounded genuinely pained. "You're a good worker, Mia. Never late, never complain, customers like you. But these lawyers, they implied that Ashford Industries does a lot of business lunches here. Corporate accounts, big parties. That's a significant portion of our revenue. They didn't say it directly, but the message was clear. Keep you employed, lose their business. So you're choosing his money over me? I'm choosing to keep this restaurant afloat and 20 other people employed," Dan corrected. "I'm sorry, Mia. I really am. I'll give you 2 weeks severance, write you a good reference, but I can't fight Ashford Industries. I don't have the resources." Mia walked out of his office, collected her apron and her tips from her locker, and left the Harborview for the last time. Carlos caught her at the door, pulled her into a fierce hug that smelled of cooking grease and aftershave. "This is wrong," he said. "You know that, right? This is wrong." "I know,"
Mia's voice was steady, even though everything inside her was screaming. But apparently wrong doesn't matter when you're rich enough. She went home, called Patricia, added wrongful termination to the growing list of Richard Ashford's sins, and she steeled herself for what was coming next. Saturday, the Tribune published the story online a day early to beat a rumored injunction. The headline was simple and devastating. Ashford Industries CEO accused of silencing multiple victims through intimidation and legal threats. The article was masterful. Sarah had woven together Mia's story with those of Marcus, Elena, and David, creating a portrait of a man who'd spent decades using money and power to escape accountability. There were quotes from legal experts about the questionable enforceability of NDAs that bound people who'd never signed them. There were excerpts from Richard's letter to Rosa, not the whole thing, just enough to show the cold,
Transactional nature of his approach to human relationships. And there were photographs. Mia's mother, young and hopeful. Mia herself, standing outside Ashford Industries. Marcus's mangled hand. Lena's son in a hospital bed. The story went viral within hours. Social media exploded. News outlets picked it up. By evening, reporters were camped outside Mia's apartment building, outside Ashford Industries, outside the homes of Richard's grown children. Mia watched it unfold from Patricia's office, where she'd gone to escape the circus. Her phone was ringing constantly. Journalists requesting interviews, strangers offering support or criticism, lawyers from Ashford Industries demanding she cease and desist from all further public statements. "This is just the beginning," Patricia warned. "They're going to come at you with everything they have. Are you ready?" Mia thought about her mother, about Rosa Torres, who died with her secrets intact, who'd protected Richard Ashford even after he'd discarded her like trash. And she thought about all the other people he'd hurt, all the other stories still waiting to be told. "I'm ready," she said. Sunday morning, Richard Ashford's carefully constructed world began to crack. The Tribune's print edition hit doorsteps with Mia's story on the front page. By 9 a.m., 3 television networks had picked it up for their Sunday morning news shows. By 10, #Ashford Accountability was trending on Twitter. By 11, protesters had gathered outside Ashford Industries headquarters with signs reading, "Believe survivors," and "Billionaires aren't above the law." Mia watched from Patricia's office, alternating between her laptop and the television mounted on the wall. Every new development felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life implode on national television. But the interview requests were real enough. The threatening emails were real. The lawyers calling Patricia with settlement offers, increasingly generous ones, were very real. "They're panicking," Patricia said with satisfaction, reading through the latest offer on her tablet. $300,000, full release of all claims, mutual non-disparagement agreement. That's up from $150 just 3 days ago. They know the story has legs and they're trying to contain the damage. "What should I do?" Mia asked. "That depends. Do you want money or accountability?" It should have been an easy question. Mia had been raised poor, had watched her mother stretch every dollar until it screamed, knew exactly what $300,000 could buy: security, education, freedom from the constant anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck. But she also knew what it would cost: her silence, her story, her mother's truth. "Accountability," she said firmly. "I want him to face consequences." Patricia smiled, fierce and proud. "Then we keep fighting." By Sunday afternoon, the dam had truly broken. 4 more former Ashford Industries employees came forward with their own stories of intimidation and abuse.
A former executive assistant named Gloria Martinez revealed that she'd been sexually harassed by Richard and then forced to sign an NDA after threatening to report him to HR. A factory worker named James Chen described being pressured to falsify safety inspection reports to avoid regulatory fines. An accountant named Rebecca Williams, Marcus's sister, it turned out, shared documents that suggested systematic wage theft affecting hundreds of employees. Each new revelation made the pattern clearer. Richard Ashford wasn't just a man who'd made one mistake 25 years ago. He was someone who'd built his empire on the backs of people he'd silenced, exploited, and discarded. The Ashford family's response was swift and carefully orchestrated. By Sunday evening, they'd hired a crisis management firm and put out a statement. Mr. Ashford categorically denies the baseless allegations made against him and Ashford Industries. These claims represent a coordinated effort to damage his reputation and extract financial settlements. Mr. Ashford has spent his career building a company that provides good jobs and contributes to communities across the country. He will vigorously defend himself and his family against this campaign of defamation. The statement was predictable, lawyered to within an inch of its life. But what came next wasn't.
Monday morning, Richard Ashford's 3 children held a press conference. Daniel, Victoria, and Christopher stood together outside the family's estate, united in their defense of their father. Daniel, tall, confident, every inch his father's son, took the lead. "Our father is a good man who's being targeted by people seeking financial gain. We stand by him completely, and we're prepared to use every legal resource at our disposal to protect his good name and our family's privacy." Victoria, the lawyer, added, "The allegations in the Tribune story are unsubstantiated and rely heavily on documents that may have been forged or taken out of context. We're conducting our own investigation, and we're confident the truth will vindicate our father." Christopher said nothing, but his presence was support enough. The 3 of them, handsome and polished and born into wealth, presenting a united front against the accusations leveled by a waitress and a handful of working-class people. Mia watched the press conference from her apartment, where she'd finally returned, despite Patricia's concerns about the media presence outside. She studied their faces, her half-siblings, she realized with a jolt. These were people she shared blood with, DNA with, a father with. But they weren't family. They were strangers defending the man who'd paid Mia's mother to disappear. Her phone rang. Sarah Chen. "Have you seen the Ashford kids' press conference?" "Watching it now." "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Mia lied. "It's a lot, but I'm okay." "There's going to be more," Sarah warned. "Richard's lawyers are going scorched earth. They filed motions to compel you to turn over all your communications with me and the Tribune, claiming you're part of a conspiracy to commit extortion. And they're trying to get a gag order to prevent you from making any more public statements." "Can they do that?" "They can try. Patricia will fight it. But Mia, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. They're going to investigate every aspect of your life, every mistake you've ever made, every bad decision, every relationship that ended badly. They'll use it all to paint you as unstable, greedy, unreliable." Mia thought about her life. Unglamorous, unremarkable, marked by poverty and loss, but also by quiet dignity and hard work. What could they possibly find? "Let them look. I'm not ashamed of who I am." "Good," Sarah said, "because that's exactly the attitude you need to survive this." The week that followed was a masterclass in character assassination. Anonymous sources, clearly fed information by Ashford's team, began leaking stories to friendly media outlets. Mia was portrayed as a troubled young woman with a history of financial instability. They found the medical debt from her mother's cancer treatment and framed it as evidence of irresponsibility rather than tragedy. They interviewed former classmates who remembered her as quiet and kept to herself, normal traits for someone grieving their dying mother, but spun to suggest antisocial tendencies.
One particularly vicious article suggested Mia had been planning this shakedown for years, that she'd deliberately gotten a job at the Harborview knowing Richard sometimes ate there, that the whole thing was a calculated con. Never mind that Mia had been working there for 3 years before Richard walked in. Never mind that she'd initially wanted nothing but to be left alone. Facts didn't matter when you had enough money to control the narrative. The attacks extended beyond Mia. Marcus Williams was accused of being a drunk whose own negligence had caused his accident. Elena Rodriguez's son's cancer was attributed to family history rather than environmental contamination. David Park was painted as a disgruntled employee who'd been fired for cause and was seeking revenge. But for every attack, there was also support. Advocacy groups rallied around Mia's cause. Workers' rights organizations held demonstrations outside Ashford Industries facilities in 3 states. Legal experts wrote op-eds criticizing the use of NDAs to silence victims. And more people came forward.
By Wednesday, the list of accusers had grown to 12. A former janitor who'd been fired after reporting that executives were ordering him to dispose of documents that should have been preserved for regulatory review. A supplier who'd been blackballed after refusing to pay kickbacks. A local politician who'd been threatened when she tried to impose stricter environmental regulations on Ashford's factories. The tide was turning, slowly but perceptibly. What had started as one woman's accusation was becoming a movement. Thursday brought a development no one had anticipated. Victoria Ashford, Richard's daughter, the family lawyer, 1/3 of the United Front at Monday's press conference, requested a private meeting with Patricia and Mia. They met at a neutral location, a conference room at Patricia's law partner's office downtown. Victoria arrived alone, no lawyers or PR handlers, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual power suits. She looked exhausted, older than her 28 years, and when she saw Mia for the first time, she stopped dead in the doorway. "You look just like the pictures," she said quietly. "What pictures?" Mia asked. Victoria sat down carefully, as if her bones might break. "My father keeps a locked drawer in his study at home. I found the key when I was in high school, snooped, like teenagers do. Inside were photographs of a woman I didn't recognize. She was beautiful, young, happy in a way my mother has never been. There were letters, too, though I'd never read them. I just knew they were important, secret. And now I know why." She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. "I've spent the last 3 days going through my father's private files. I'm an attorney, so I know what to look for. NDAs with enforcement clauses that are probably illegal, settlements paid from offshore accounts to avoid disclosure, instructions to HR departments about firing employees who made complaints. My father documented everything because he never thought anyone would dare look." She met Mia's eyes. "I spent my whole life believing he was a great man, that he built something meaningful, that he cared about people. But these documents..." Her voice cracked. "He's been systematically silencing and exploiting people for decades, and I helped him. I've been his lawyer for 3 years. I've reviewed contracts, negotiated settlements, drafted NDAs. I didn't know the full picture, but I should have asked questions. I should have looked closer." "Why are you here?" Patricia asked carefully. "Because I'm done protecting him, because Mia deserves to know the truth, and because there are dozens more victims out there who deserve justice." She pulled out another document. "This is a list of everyone who signed an NDA with Ashford Industries in the last 20 years. Names, dates, settlement amounts. I'm giving it to you, and I'm prepared to testify about everything I know." Mia stared at her half-sister, this woman who'd lived in wealth and privilege while Mia had struggled, who defended their father on national television 3 days ago, who was now burning down everything she'd known. "What will this cost you?" "Everything," Victoria said simply. "My relationship with my father, Probably with my brothers, my job at the firm, maybe my career. No company wants to hire a whistleblower. But I looked at your mother's picture, Mia. I read the letter my father sent her, and I realized that could have been me if I'd been born to different circumstances. He didn't see her as a person, just as a problem to solve with money. And I won't be part of that anymore. The evidence Victoria provided changed everything. With insider documentation and her willingness to testify, the case against Richard Ashford became unassailable. Within days, federal investigators opened probes into labor violations, environmental crimes, and financial irregularities at Ashford Industries. The board of directors forced Richard to step down as CEO pending the investigations. Major clients began canceling contracts, citing reputational concerns. Daniel and Christopher doubled down on their support for their father, but cracks appeared in the family's united front. Catherine Ashford filed for divorce, her lawyers making it clear she had no knowledge of her husband's affairs or illegal activities. The estate was divided. Assets were frozen pending litigation. Richard himself made one final public appearance, a press conference where he read a prepared statement denying all wrongdoing and announcing his intention to fight the charges. But he looked diminished somehow, smaller, older, stripped of the aura of invulnerability that had protected him for so long. When reporters asked about Mia, about Rosa, about the daughter he'd paid to disappear, he said only, "No comment," and walked away. 3 months later, Richard Ashford pleaded guilty to multiple counts of obstruction of justice, fraud, and labor law violations. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $50 million in restitution to his victims. Ashford Industries survived under new management, implementing sweeping reforms to corporate culture and compliance. The money Mia received from the restitution fund, $200,000, felt like blood money, just as her mother's settlement had, but she used it differently. She established a scholarship fund for children who'd lost parents to medical debt. She went back to school, studying labor law with Patricia's mentorship. She became an advocate for workers' rights, speaking at conferences about the cost of silence and the power of collective action. Victoria became a close friend, then family in the truest sense. They'd spend evenings at Mia's apartment, upgraded now but still modest, talking about their mother and trying to understand the man who'd shaped both their lives in such different ways. Daniel and Christopher never reached out, couldn't forgive their sister's betrayal, but Victoria seemed at peace with her choice. On the first anniversary of the Tribune story, Mia visited her mother's grave. She brought roses, Rosa's favorite, and sat on the grass beside the simple headstone she had been able to upgrade with her restitution money. "I told your story, Mama," she said quietly. "I broke the silence you kept for 25 years. I hope that's okay. I hope you understand why I had to." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, carrying the salt smell from the harbor. Mia thought about her mother, young and hopeful in those photographs, making an impossible choice with grace and dignity. Rosa had chosen silence to protect her daughter. Mia had chosen truth to honor her mother. Both decisions were acts of love. She placed the roses at the base of the headstone, where Rosa Torres' name was carved in granite. Beneath it, Mia had added a line that captured everything her mother had been. She carried her burdens with grace and loved without limit. As Mia walked back to her car, her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Chen. Another whistleblower, another story about corporate abuse and silenced victims. Another chance to make sure that people like her mother, people who'd been erased, forgotten, paid to disappear, were finally heard. Mia replied, "I'm in. Let's tell their story." The work of justice was never finished, but at least now she had a voice to join the fight, and she would use it for everyone who'd been forced into silence, for every secret that needed telling, for every truth that powerful men had tried to bury. Her mother's signature, preserved in that 25-year-old letter, had been a threat once. Now it was evidence. Proof that Rosa Torres existed, had mattered, had loved and sacrificed, and deserved to be remembered. And Mia would make sure she was.
Thank you for listening to this story of courage, justice, and the power of truth. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Mia's position? Your engagement helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Until next time, remember your voice matters, your truth matters, and silence only protects those who deserve it least.